What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we don't know when the Switch 2 is coming out. We don't know how much money it's going to be. We don't even know the games for it, but somehow, some way, it's already being resold on eBay for way too much money. We're gonna go over exactly what's happening here today. Also, we're already talking about a surprise shakeup at Sony when it comes to the overall structure with personnel and leadership, and it kind of puts Herman Hulst in a very awkward position. And then what's next for God of War? Well, apparently some information is getting out there, at least telling us, I guess, the next realm or the next land, the next mythology that Kratos could be visiting. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below. And we're gonna start today with Nintendo and a sale for the Switch, the Supercharge sale. And I wanted to point this out because while we know that the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, we're still waiting for at least some follow-up information on that as to how many games are backwards compatible. We assume most of them, maybe a small percentage won't be, and any extra benefits for the new device. Well, with that in mind, we are still seeing sales from Nintendo for the current Switch that will follow up then to the next-gen system, and you can see it here with actually many titles, even from their first-party library that's on sale. We'll scroll through some here. This will be running until February 9th, so you still have 10 or 11 days to kind of check these out. As like New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is marked down 33%. You have Mario Golf marked down 33%, Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, as well as Kingdom Battle, Kirby, and more. Now, I will say I was going through this, and I think the one that I'm actually going to be picking up is Crow Country. It's not that it's not discounted a ton. It's like 20% off, but it's $16. I've heard a lot of good stuff about this game, and I think it's finally time to make the move for this one. But of course, leave some suggestions down below, and actually let me know if there are any games in here that you would like to see have some pretty big, we'll say somewhat significant improvements maybe for frame rate or visuals when the next system shows up with backwards compatibility. Also, we did get the official announcement for MLB The Show 25, and it seems like a couple of systems are left off the list, and I assume for a lot of people this is going to make them happy because it does seem like last generation is finally starting to be phased out. When you see the sports titles do it, then you're like, okay, we're finally getting away from that generation. Well, we can see this over on PlayStation Blog, where they say, we're also thrilled to announce that MLB The Show 25 will launch on March 18th on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, and Nintendo Switch. However, the game will not be on platform subscription services in 2025. Say early access begins on March 14th, of course. Basically, all games try to do this now for extra money for anyone who purchases the digital deluxe edition. We'll talk about that again here later on in the show with another story, but that's right, no Game Pass this year, so it's just being sold a la carte on Xbox, which it had already been sold like that. You could have just bought it outright. But its inclusion in Game Pass certainly made it a lot easier for people to jump into MLB The Show that year, and sports titles, we know they do drop significantly in price, sometimes just a few months later, especially as the season goes on and on for, in this case, baseball. The prices for the games will drop just to keep drumming up more interest, and later on, actually, after the season ends, then it just goes on steep discount, typically. But in this case, no Game Pass, still a Switch version, which is good, obviously, as that's Nintendo's latest system. We'll see what Sony has in store for Nintendo's next system, though, coming up here pretty soon. Oh, and if you saw the announcement for Ninja Gaiden 2 Black on Xbox and then realized, oh, it's also coming to PlayStation, turns out there's even a physical copy that will be following up here in a couple of months, and we can see this is over on PlayAsia, as it appears they have the physical exclusive. Now, this is a multi-language disc for the PlayStation 5 specifically, so it will support English, but it is going at the price of $49.99, as they say is a preliminary picture. I assume the cover art's going to be really cool and should maybe mimic even what we had back on the Xbox 360 with Ryo Hayabusa there, of course, the big scythe and stuff. So I assume that's what they're going to play into, but we'll see. However, I did order this physically. It's coming out at the end of March, or at least that's when they're shipping, March 27th. So I do have it on Xbox Game Pass. I'm playing through it there, but I wanted a physical copy for the shelf because Ninja Gaiden 2 is awesome. I love playing it on the 360, having a blast playing through it now again. And yeah, I'll probably check it out on the PS5 Pro as well when this disc comes in. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo Switch 2 and the special events that are coming up, starting starting in April and will go for a few months there, where you can have the Switch 2 experience that we assume people will just be let in for certain amounts of time to play different games, probably a lot of the launch titles specifically, I assume, or launch window games. They're in person to get their own impressions and try it out. Well, a lot of people are trying to get into these events. Go figure, it's the Switch 2. It's a highly anticipated follow-up device from Nintendo after the wildly successful Switch. So, after people didn't get in, you figure they're going to start looking around for ways to get in. Whether it's one of their friends got in, they're like, hey, tag me as like a +1 or +2 or something. Or seeing if anyone wants to sell their ticket. Now, this is an odd one, which we'll get to in a second, but go figure, some people probably realized this and started posting them on eBay. And the pricing for this is, well, you can see it here. Here's one listing. It's currently up for $1,000. This is the Switch 2 experience ticket for a New York City event on April 6th. And it's garnered a lot of interest. There's like 170 something views in the last 24 hours just for this auction or this buy it now specifically. So people are of course coming through and checking it out. It had like the little fire icon on it, so a lot of interest on this one. There's also one currently that's being bid on right now, and it doesn't end for almost another week currently, and there's 6 bids. It's at $56. You're like, okay. So the $1,000, maybe they're just taking a shot, pie in the sky kind of thing here. Well, there was actually one that did end, and not only did it end, it says it's sold. So on eBay, it's very important to note that you can go over to the left side and you can filter results and pick completed or sold. You always want to pick sold if you're just trying to see if something actually completed the transaction, and I guess both parties agreed on it, because you can complete a listing by canceling it. In this case, no, Switch 2 event tickets for $1,000 or best offer. Maybe somebody offered them significantly less, but at least from what we're seeing from the outside, yeah, $1,000 for these tickets is that's just crazy. So I'm looking at this now as thinking, if this is where we are with the tickets, what's going to happen when the system comes out? Because I mean, it's going to be a mad dash for the system one way or the other. They could show one good game at the event, doesn't matter, it's the Switch 2. And I think Nintendo is at that point now where at least the initial wave of systems will sell easily and will most likely end up on retailers and auction sites like eBay for probably 2 to 3 times the amount. So if it's a $400 system, we very well could be seeing $1,000 Switch 2s set up day one, or at least in the first week, no problem. And after seeing this, I might be lowballing it with that one. So the only issue here is I don't believe you could transfer the tickets over. I think they're supposed to be linked to your account, and Nintendo was very purposeful when they did that so that you can't go on the secondhand market and sell your place in line. It is linked to you, and if you can't go, well, then they go to that waiting list for people to sign up as a first-come, first-served basis. So don't buy these tickets, because I don't think there's an end here where you actually get them and can go to the event. Especially, well, at least not buying them secondhand here. You'll have to hope that maybe your waiting list gets picked up and Nintendo sends you an email saying you're in. Next up, let's talk about a surprise shakeup from Sony that was pushed out in a press release last night. And this is ahead of their fiscal quarter results that are coming up here in a few weeks. But of course, last year, we know that Sony announced that there was like this dual or co-CEO thing that was happening. And this was kind of a strange one, the way they were setting this up. They had Holst and Nishino next to each other. One kind of in Japan dealing with some of the hardware stuff, and Herman Holst was dealing with a lot of the first-party studios and kind of working more like a studio manager, but they were going to work in tandem equally to release games, hardware, and keep the Sony Interactive Entertainment running well. The only issue is recently it hasn't. So they are making money. They've shown this multiple times. The only problem is they've been canceling a lot of games, and some of these have been very, very consequential, especially when you look at something like Concord that was a public disaster and could have cost upwards of $400 million with some reports. Even if you're conservative, cut that in half, $200 million, but then also the public egg on the face of the live service push there was not great. And all we've heard about, otherwise there were canceled projects from that initial live service initiative. Well, now Sony seems to be changing some things up here. We can see this in that press release where they say Sony Group Corporation, Sony Interactive Entertainment, the company behind PlayStation, today announced the appointment of Hideaki Nishino to the role of president and CEO effective April 1st. That'll start their fiscal year, by the way, coming up. This marks an evolution designed to maximize synergies across SIE that was announced in May 2024, in which Nishino was appointed CEO of the Platform Business Group effective June 1st, alongside Herman Holst, who was appointed CEO of the Studio Business Group. Holst will continue to serve as CEO of the Studio Business Group and will report to Nishino. Now, this is from Nishino in a quote saying, "I am truly honored to take the helm at Sony Interactive Entertainment. Technology and creativity are two of our biggest strengths as we continue to focus on developing experiences that deliver entertainment for everyone. We will continue to grow the PlayStation community in new ways, such as IP expansion, while also delivering the best in technology innovation. I want to thank Herman for his expertise and leadership as he continues his role as CEO, Studio Business Group. I am deeply grateful for the PlayStation community and their continued support, and I am very excited for what the future holds." Now, it's hard to look at this and not see it as a demotion for Herman Holst. You could say, hey, Nishino got a promotion, and now he's at the top of the list there in charge at Sony Interactive Entertainment or PlayStation. But the idea was this co-CEO thing between Herman Holst and Hideaki Nishino, and now it's not. Like, he's moved up and Holst has moved down a bit on the corporate ladder. And when you realize that and look at what they're saying here and how they're rearranging, you go, oh, okay, maybe Concord really was a big push from Herman Holst, and it didn't work out clearly. And the live service stuff, while Jim Ryan surely greenlit the majority of that, seems like Herman Holst was also kind of there pushing it along. And I mean, that's how we can kind of read things from the outside looking in, and just kind of the result here. And I have seen some Sony fans excited about this move because Nishino is viewed more as a traditionalist for PlayStation. I mean, he's been with the company since 2000, so quite a while. And the way he talks about the console, he's more interested in kind of holding that up above everything else. And that probably includes the live service stuff and the PC ports. So in this instance now, Herman Holst would have to then report to Nishino, and he would kind of have the last say on a lot of this stuff. And probably a good chunk of that will come down to what gets greenlit and what doesn't, and where do like budgets go and stuff. So, yeah, interesting shakeup here for Sony, as they are, again, it sounds weird, I know, but they are halfway through, a little more than halfway through, we think, the PlayStation 5 generation. The PlayStation 6 is in development behind the scenes. Games are getting greenlit now for PlayStation 6 titles. So it makes sense for Hideaki Nishino to take the reins here, if you will, and start steering the ship as they work towards, yes, next generation. That sounds weird because the PS5, I see it all the time in the comments, people are still waiting for it to get started. Next up, let's talk about WWE 2K25, as that was also announced officially 2 days ago, but then they had a big blowout event showing off the game itself, and of course announcing a bunch of different additions in terms of like versions of the game you can buy and spend more money on, but also a specific feature for current gen systems that, once again, kind of leaving behind the last generation devices. Which, first, let's start. We have the trailer here, as well as a bunch of features we can go over, starting with a bunch of new arenas that they'll be adding in, of course, for like the 2024 year that we just ended. They have a massive roster, they say, 300 playable characters spanning multiple generations. They have a unified My Rise, which will include like multi-gender storylines as well as matches. So that'll be interesting to see that play out online. Although that used to be pretty common back in the day with some of the older games. You could have men and women fighting each other all over the place in the backstage area, hitting each other's chairs, and that was pretty common actually back then. Also, the MyGM they mention has online with up to 4 players now. They mentioned expanded gameplay, although we'll see when we have that, when it comes out and we have it in our hands there. And that's the Bloodlines Dynasty. So in the showcase, it's going to pretty much be Paul Heyman narrating and, as they say, celebrating the wrestling family dynasties, the Bloodline, and you'll kind of go through, I assume, different matches and storylines that are set up as you follow through and try to complete the matches, typically in a set fashion to mimic what actually happened in the past. Now, the big thing here when it comes to current generation is The Island, and that's going to be specific for PS5 and Xbox Series X, they say. I'm now reading that and realizing that they did not say Series S, so we'll see if that ends up being a whole controversy. But nonetheless, the idea here is they say it's a themed world where you complete quests, take on challenges, and you compete in live events to upgrade and customize your My Superstar through multiple storyline chapters. And I understand this 2K. I also understand that's probably a way that they can get a bunch of microtransactions, extra money out of people, as I believe that's stuff they do in like NBA 2K, for example. But that is at least better than what we've had previously, which didn't really feel like they put a lot of innovation into the storylines or like the career mode stuff. Now, on top of this, you do have different versions, as I mentioned, you can buy. The standard edition is $69.99. That will release March 14th. If you want a 7-day head start, as I mentioned, all these companies are doing this. 7-day head start gets you is $100 for the Dead Man edition, or you can move up to the Bloodline edition, comes with a bunch of extra stuff. That's $130. So effectively, the game is $100 and comes out March 7th. Remember we just talked about that with games going up to $100? We've talked about how these companies have already gotten there technically. You can buy it early access, 7 days early, $100, or wait a bit longer, get it for $70. But either way, my thing when it comes to these wrestling games, I think it was better back when they came out every 2 or 3 years. The yearly thing, it really does feel like a small incremental step up like all these other sports games, and I understand. It sells every year. I'm sure WWE loves doing this because it makes them a bunch of extra money, sure. But still, I miss the days when it wasn't numbered just by the year. They had interesting names like Shut Your Mouth, Day of Reckoning, Here Comes the Pain. So that's kind of where I am with it. But yeah, I'll probably be checking it out. I did enjoy 2K24 just for the back and forth online multiplayer with friends. So I'm sure we'll play this one too. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about some early rumors and reports around the next God of War game, of course, coming off the heels of God of War Ragnarok, which was a big seller for Sony there. So naturally, they would like to continue the series. And unfortunately, the plans for that was Bluepoint doing a live service multiplayer God of War game that got canceled. So, okay, what's next then? Well, it does seem like Kratos' journey will be taking him to another mythology, another land, and we can see this posted up. This is over on The Game Post. It says, according to a new report, Sony is likely working on a brand new God of War game set in Egyptian mythology. This information comes from Daniel Rickman. The post reads, Sony is casting Middle Eastern actors for an unknown AAA game, which is likely to be the next God of War that explores Egyptian mythology. In the making of God of War, this is very important, by the way, The Game Post does note this. Creative director Cory Barlog did talk about the studio initially considering setting the game in Egyptian mythology before ultimately choosing the Norse path. And that's one of the reasons why this has come up already. Like, we've already discussed the idea of, okay, maybe they will go to Egyptian mythology now after the Norse mythology, that saga seems to have concluded. Okay, we're going to move to Egyptian. And so now we've done Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology. To me, it makes sense. And Cory Barlog did kind of have paint this picture of Kratos going through the desert with sand all around him, climbing on top of a dune, and then looking down at his big ancient city. So the setting also does play in nicely, obviously, to God of War. And the thing that I'm curious about is, so far, when Kratos has shifted from Greek to Norse, they changed up the gameplay. And the viewpoint, the speed of the game, differences in terms of mechanics, I assume they would do it again. So I'm curious. To me, that's the biggest thing. The Egyptian mythology, sure, that all lines up. What would be the big gameplay innovation or shift? So I don't know if you just make another over-the-shoulder third-person, quote-unquote, Sony template game. I think he kind of shifted up a little bit there too. So that's my big question. And in this case, them looking now for casting and stuff for voice, it does seem to be them kind of speculating themselves on what that's for and it being for God of War. But let's just say it is. It's probably not going to be out for a while. This might be another one of those situations of cross-gen, PS5 and PlayStation 6. So we got plenty of time to try to figure out what the big twist for the game would be. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, which is Game of the Year Madness. Just about done here. The semifinals have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth going over Metaphor ReFantazio, and this sets up the finals, which will be starting today. It's going to run for 2 days of voting. And that will be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth versus Astrobot, which it is exactly what I figured it would be. I mean, that's seed 1 and 2. We did have some upsets along the way. Indiana Jones, I think, went further than a lot of people were expecting. But yep, here we are at the end. Astrobot against Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We'll see, I guess, who wins by the end of this week. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Lord Vader, who says, if this mouse function is legit, it's going to be wild seeing what accessories follow up the launch. Well, I think the obvious thing would be some sort of mouse pad. Nintendo-themed mouse pads, company-themed mouse pads, special editions you buy that comes with a mouse pad. That all, I think, lines up. I'm more interested to see than the accessories for that function to make it more comfortable to use on the couch or on the go. So consider that as well. Maybe like a hard mouse pad, not like it's like some sort of like felt or foam or something, like something that you can put on an armchair, like a chair of an arm, and it works out fine there with enough surface area to move around. That's kind of what I'm thinking there. Who knows? Maybe they sell gloves and stuff for a mouse just to make sure your hand doesn't get fatigued or cramped, or you get the old the Mario Party blister on there. So one thing's for sure. Tons of accessories, I'm sure, will be made in some fashion for this mouse functionality, of course, provided that is a thing. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to hear a bit more about how Sony got to this point where Nishino is now at the head of Sony Interactive and Herman Hulst seems to have moved under him with a lot of this live service stuff kind of backfiring. I'll leave a video about that right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.